So now we move to our third and last speaker of this morning, of this session. And that is my pleasure also to introduce Anne Pépin. She's a CNRS senior researcher with, I would say, quite an impressive or notable academic career. She started with a bachelor in physics, then she moved to an engineering degree, and then she got a PhD in electronics. So you see that actually she has quite some experience in different STEM fields. Since 2017, she's on leave from CNRS because she joined the gender sector at the European Commission as the Directorate General for Research and Innovation as a senior policy officer. And before this appointment, she was the director of a mission for the place of women at CNRS, which is a very strategic unit in order to design and coordinate and then assessing all actions aimed at improving the gender balance and the gender equality within the organization. Today, she will tell us about the new setting of the European policy on gender equality. And Anne, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen. I hope this works. Just confirm that everything is fine.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we see you. We see your screen. Yes.
Okay, great. So I wish I could be there with you. Unfortunately, that was not possible, but I'll try to give you a very different presentation from the two that you listen to. And actually, of course, there are many overlaps, but I will try to describe the overall policy framework at a European Commission and European Union level on gender equality in research and innovation. I'll first describe quickly what is going on at Commission level, all fields considered, all policies, fields of policy considered. And then I'll focus on research and innovation, what we're doing more specifically at the European research area level. And that's very, very timely now. It's really being constructed right now. And then I'll detail what we have introduced regarding gender equality provision in the framework program, Horizon Europe. I will focus on the STEM fields as much as possible, as well as on the integration of the gender dimension into research and innovation content in STEM. But I will go a bit more broadly so that you get, I hope, in 30 minutes, quite a complete picture of the situation. So the policy context. The Commission itself. So since President Ursula von der Leyen took office, there has really been a strong momentum for gender equality. She set achieving a union of equality as one of her political priorities, and that was translated at different levels. She asked for every member state to nominate a man and a woman in order to have a gender balanced college of commissioners. Not all member states followed that, but in the end, we do have a gender balanced college of commissioners. She set a target of 50% women, gender parity among managers at all levels in the Commission, and we're on the way to achieve this by 2024. And she created a new commissioner position on equality with a trans-commission task force on equality to address gender equality first, but also other equality aspect, other diversity aspect, with the ambition to have an intersectional approach for this. So the first key strategic document to be adopted was the gender equality strategy, which already highlighted that research and innovation were key areas, already hinting to the fact that we could require from applicants to have a gender equality plan, and also announcing that there would be funding for gender studies and intersectional research. After that, 5 more strategies were adopted I won't detail them all, but what's really being discussed right now is also very much pushed by the Parliament and followed by the European Court of Auditors, is how to track expenditures from the different programs at Commission level, how they contribute to gender equality. So a way of gender budgeting. And of course, I think this is very much related to what we're trying to discuss today, how to measure how much of the funding promotes gender equality, actually integrates a gender dimension. So that's at Commission level. Then our core framework, just a few key figures on both women's representation and also the integration of the gender dimension that we report on every 3 years through these She Figures publication. I guess many of you are familiar with this, but just to highlight that in the latest edition, actually the figures themselves are from 2018, 2019. We're almost at parity among PhD graduates, but in ICT, in engineering, it's way below, so less than 30% in engineering. Overall, all fields considered, all levels, there are 33%, not yet, of women among researchers. In grade A positions, so full professorships, only 26%, and actually 18% in the STEM fields. Heads of institution, 24% across EU member states. And on scientific boards, it's still, less than 40%. And the integration of the gender dimension in the publication, the peer-reviewed publications, that's less than 2% across the EU, and it's highest in the medical and health sciences. And I think this was pretty clear in the presentation you listened to earlier, but it's lowest in engineering and technology. These are a few figures. Now, the policy framework. Since 2012, and the adoption of a communication from the Commission on the European research area, gender equality and gender mainstreaming in research have been a priority with 3 underpinning objectives: gender equality in scientific careers at all levels, gender balance in decision-making, and the integration of the gender dimension in R&I content, so sex and gender-based analysis, with a common approach to achieve this, which is through institutional change, actually systemic change at national level and in organization, preferably through gender equality plans. And the Commission has supported this. Funding has been attributed to over 200 organizations to implement gender equality plans since the 7th framework program. This has led to a wealth of good practices that have been presented in the first edition of the Gender Equality and Academia tool that we co-developed with the European Institute for Gender Equality, the GeAR tool. But there have also been other support actions, trainings, communities of practice, support to policy coordination at transnational level. So quite a lot of efforts, but still there are persisting barriers. You saw the She Figures data. And in September 2020, the Commission proposed a new framework for the European research area with an opening to inclusiveness, to intersections with other social categories. So you've heard already quite a lot about intersectionality, but also trying to better include the private sector, the innovation sector, and make sure that everybody is on board at EU level. So geographical inclusiveness. And there's this concept of inclusive gender equality plans and policies that has been proposed and supported by member states. And the latest proof of that is this package of documents that were adopted in November with a pact for research and innovation in Europe that sets gender equality and inclusiveness as principles, values of the European research area. Council conclusion, to which a very important document, which is in a way our roadmap for the coming years, is the ERA policy agenda, in which there's a specific action on the promotion of gender equality and fostering inclusiveness, taking note of the Ljubljana Declaration. So this declaration, if you're not familiar with it, was spearheaded by the Slovenian presidency in the previous semester, and it really underlines key areas that we should jointly address. This was endorsed by 25 out of the 27 member states, and by associated countries, and by the Commission itself. So the new framework, which you can see here, so this is Action 5. There are 4 interlinked outcome deliverables that member states have agreed as being important to address. 2 are very much related to this inclusive gender equality policies. The first one, so have really a coordination mechanism, and then develop the concept, the approach that includes gender mainstreaming, but also this opening to intersectionality. That's the first and the third deliverables, and 2 more concrete ones, one on gender-based violence, and the other one on integrating and evaluating the gender perspective in research and innovation content, with a really strong focus on getting research funding organization on boards. And there's also an aspect about bias in evaluations, in assessment in that one. But where are we at now? So basically what we are waiting for, you can see on the bottom left there, is that at least half of the member states, so at least 14 member states, say, yes, we want to volunteer to implementing this Action 5 and contributing to its deliverables. This is expected before the end of this month. So it's really now that it's taking place. And very important also is having as many as possible stakeholders organization. LERU was mentioned earlier by Sigrid, but the European University Association, Science Europe, that gathers funders in particular, and other type of stakeholders, are members of what is called the ERA Forum. So this I already mentioned. Just to clarify, we, the Commission, proposed to an entity called the ERA Forum, a new Commission expert group where there are representatives of all the member states and of associated countries. We proposed a detail on the contents of what these deliverables could look like, and now they have to clarify what they could do and whether they want to volunteer. So very important moment right now, and the possibility to have a subgroup dedicated to this. So I was mentioning the ERA Forum. That's the new structure, really about implementing. It's the operational body, but there's also other bodies, the European Research Area and Innovation Committee, in which there used to be an advising body that was specifically on gender in research and innovation. But now all these bodies have been discontinued. There's not only the core ERAC, that is a preparatory body to the council in its competitiveness configuration. This may be a bit too detailed for you. I will stop here, but just to tell you that it's happening now, and it's important that member states be on board. And in addition to this, a very important framework is the European Strategy for Universities that were proposed and adopted by the Commission in January, where there's a specific section on diversity, inclusiveness, and gender equality, with a specific action that the Commission should develop with stakeholders and member states to address the underrepresentation of women in the STEM fields, and trying to develop a roadmap that would include a manifesto of STEM-oriented universities, businesses on gender-inclusive STEM education, STEAM education. So trying, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, introducing the arts, humanities, creative thinking, social sciences, putting in context, in the social cultural context, the STEM subjects. So this is something the Commission is very much working on. And in addition, member states should also work on developing inclusive gender equality plans. That's it for the policy context. Now, this builds on what we introduced in gender equality. So in Horizon Europe, sorry. Basically, there are 3 levels of uptake of gender equality requirements in Horizon Europe. That's all enshrined in the legal basis. Having a gender equality plan in place for certain categories of organizations is an eligibility condition to participate in the program, all across the board. The integration of the gender dimension in research and innovation content is by default an obligation. It's an award criterion for projects that actually develop research and innovation. And gender balance among researchers in teams is a ranking criterion for proposal with the same score. I'll go quickly through all of these with a bit more time on the integration of the gender dimension. But about gender equality plans, like I said, this is now, starting with calls with deadlines this year, an obligation for public bodies, research organization, and higher education institution, private or public. And this is done actually through a self-declaration, a questionnaire that organizations have to fill, proving that they do address these 4 mandatory process-related requirements. That the gender equality plan is a public document endorsed by the highest level in the organization, published on the organization website and disseminated, known by everybody in this institution, that you have dedicated resources, financial, human resources to implement this gender equality plan, that it's evidence-based, so that you collect sex and or gender disaggregated data, that you monitor it and report on it annually, and that you train, build capacity, raise awareness on gender equality in research and innovation, and in particular on unconscious gender biases. That's the mandatory part. And then we recommend some areas, these 5 areas, but of course, gender equality plan can also cover others. So work-life balance, organizational culture, gender balance in decision-making, gender equality throughout the career path, so recruitment, career progression, integrating the gender dimension into the content of research and teaching, if you're a teaching institution, and addressing gender-based violence, including sexual harassment. And this builds on all the experience accumulated through the projects that we're funding under FP7 and Horizon 2020. And this GeAR tool I was mentioning earlier has been updated recently with new examples, including new example on the integration of the gender dimension in R&I content, including on intersectionality. So this is new, this is a new, and it's much more user-friendly, this tool, but we are also doing specific activities after having published a full guidance on the gender equality plan eligibility criterion. We are doing trainings to countries that have a larger amount of organizations that do not have a gender equality plan in place, and also mutual learning workshops with European university alliances. And maybe some of you are part of these alliances. So it's quite a very powerful community to advance on the implementation of these aspects, and also trying to set up a network of national level representative on gender equality plan. And of course, many of our projects also are doing activities. Now the integration of the gender dimension and R&I content. It's now a requirement, as I said, by default. It's part of the methodology that all research and innovation actions, but also co-funds that do fund research and innovation have to comply with and are evaluated upon. That's mandatory. And I don't think now it's been so well explained by Londa, and also with a critical view by Sigrid, that I won't go into the detail, but it's really, we do provide guidance on how to do this. The only case where it's not mandatory is when in a specific call topic, there's a sentence that says here, it's not mandatory. And this can happen in some topics where it's, for example, developing a fabrication technology for photovoltaic cells. There, after discussing with the topic drafters, the work program Sherpas, we call them, we found that it was not necessary really to look into sex and or gender as variables in those cases. So when it's really theoretical or really technical with no direct application that can have a gender dimension, then there will be this sentence. And I was talking about guidance, and you heard everything about this report, actually, which is the final outcome of the Gendered Innovation 2 expert group that we put into place in 2018, and that developed these 15 case studies, refined methodologies on sex analysis, gender analysis, intersectional analysis, and including field-specific methods, and also making policy recommendation for the Commission. So Londa was the chair of this expert group. She was also the chair of the previous one, Gendered Innovation, that was funded under the 7th Framework Program. So many of the case studies and methodologies that she presented on the Stanford website are this material that were developed with the funding from the European Commission. And these policy recommendations we did follow very closely, as you saw, by setting the integration of the gender dimension as a priority, well, a requirement by default. To applicants, we give explanations, links to resources in the program guide. There are also many of our projects that have specific trainings, support material on these aspects, and we link to those. And Londa already mentioned the support that Nature, for example, has been clearly giving to this new orientation of the Commission's strategy for Horizon Europe. The latest papers editorial she already mentioned that came out actually last month on the 18th of May, with the Nature journals having to report on sex and gender aspects, and referring to the example of Horizon Europe set by the Commission. And there, I don't know why. So how do we do this? Just to summarize quickly, the work program, requirement by default, we work with the topic drafters, the gender sector, and on looking at the text, making suggestion to some improvements where they can better highlight the sex and or gender aspects, and also sometimes telling them, look, there you put the little sentence that says it's not mandatory, but maybe you should revise that because there are these papers. So we do work with them, and sometimes it's also very relevant that there is this exclusion sentence. The applicants, they have to describe how the gender dimension IDEST, sex and or gender analysis is taken into account in the project's research and innovation content. And if they consider there is no such gender dimension, they have to provide a justification. And that is new. That's really new compared to Horizon 2020. We refer to gender and innovation too, and we support the applicants in better understanding this. We also support the evaluators, and actually it's still a work in process. There's a video specifically on this that is under preparation, and these experts have to assess whether the integration of the gender dimension is sufficiently addressed, if the justification for not doing it is acceptable. And then once they sign the grant agreement, the project is selected. That's just part of the methodology. So they have to report it through the deliverables, through the periodic reports. And they also commit to implementing gender mainstreaming in their projects. And the reporting, this is something that is checked by the project officers and by the project reviewers. So this is to summarize just the research and innovation funding cycle. And I don't know how much time do I have left. Okay, I have enough. So I'll just go quickly on gender balance in research teams, which is, as I said, a ranking criterion for execo proposal. So, and that's among the personnel that are named in the proposal, and they are responsible for primarily for carrying out the research and or innovation activities. So in this ranking criterion, we actually consider only women and men. And I'm saying this because a novelty in Horizon Europe is that there's now an inclusive approach to self-declaring your gender identity. Researchers can declare along 3 categories: women, men, and non-binary. Right now, the proportion of researchers declaring as non-binary is less than 1%. So this is not included in the gender balance ranking criterion. If this evolves, then we may reconsider how we calculate this ranking criteria. And finally, there's also some dedicated funding for gender equality. In cluster 2, which is social science and humanities, called Culture, Creativity, and Inclusive Society, there's funding on gender studies and intersectional research. There are 4 projects on a new age, feminisms for a new age of democracy. I should know better because I wrote the topic, that are starting pretty soon. And that's really new, that the programs are funding really feminist and gender research. Under cluster 4, that's really on digital industry and space. There was a specific topic in 2021 on tackling gender, race, and other biases in artificial intelligence. And actually 4 instead of 3 projects will be funded because there have been very good proposals. These will start pretty soon, this fall. There's also a whole package of measures for women innovators. So, of course, much of the innovation that is funded is STEM-based. And I won't go into the detail, but if you have questions, I can try to describe. And under this widening participation and strengthening the European research area program part, there are specific calls. And I have listed them here. I won't go into the details of all, just to highlight that in fall, there will be 3 projects starting on the development of a STEAM roadmap for science education in Horizon Europe, and they have to address gender equality aspects. And there's, right now, recently closed, and really the closed, and the projects are under evaluation this week. A living lab for gender responsive innovation, which is a project, so really a living lab putting together women innovators, but also gender scholars and social innovation to try to develop innovation that takes into account the gender dimension and intersectional dimension as much as possible, but also increases the amount of women as innovators in these fields, with a focus actually on the digital and green transition. So a focus on computer science and also on climate-related aspects in particular. And I will go into much more details on this. Just a few useful resources. We have a website where you can have updates on really the policy aspects and links to many resource material. And you have the link here. You would get the slides. And that's it. Maybe I will underline that because it's one of the topics we considered discussing. It's okay. I still have one. Yes, I have 2 minutes. That there's really, in this European Year of Youth this year, there is a really strong will from Commissioner Maria Gabriel to improve the situation for women in the STEM fields and for more gender inclusive STEM research and innovation. This roadmap of activities, this objective of signing a manifesto with universities, STEM-intensive universities, businesses, and other stakeholders. This will actually be first discussed tomorrow in the first European Education and Innovation Summit, where representatives from university and in particular European university alliances will give their feedback on whether they could contribute to this and how they could contribute. Some alliances are already doing a lot in this field. And in fall, there will be the Research and Innovation Days. So that's like the big landmark conference that is happening now every year that DG Research and Innovation is organizing. There will be a specific session on STEM. And over the summer, a survey will be launched to gather information from STEM-oriented universities, other higher education institutions, and organizations on how they could contribute and how they envision such a manifesto. And I'll stop here. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Anne.